At 80 years old, Michael Douglas is done playing quiet about the parts of his life he once locked away. For decades, the public saw a polished Hollywood love story, a power couple glowing on red carpets, answering questions with perfect smiles. But behind that shine, Michael says he was carrying pressure, fear, and emotional weight that never made the headlines. Loving Catherine Zeta-Jones wasn't just romance. It came with storms he never expected to survive. The world crowned them royalty, but the truth he's now sharing flips the whole picture upside down. It raises a brutal question no one wanted to ask back then. How much pain can hide inside a marriage everyone swore was flawless? Michael admits the cracks didn't start years later. They were there from the very beginning, burned into his memory. He says his life shifted in 1998, long before the public ever sensed trouble was coming. He first saw Catherine Zeta-Jones on screen in The Mask of Zorro while he was recovering from back surgery, fighting to clean up habits and addictions that had quietly ruled the previous decade of his life. At 54, Michael wasn't just a movie star. He was a man staring down midlife with trophies on the shelf, but scars on the inside. Divorce, tabloids, and the constant shadow of being Kirk Douglas's son had left him worn down, even if success never stopped knocking. He knew fame inside out, but peace stayed out of reach. And when Catherine appeared on that screen, something hit him hard. She was 29, glowing, sharp, full of fire. Everything he feared he was losing, she seemed to have in endless supply. When they finally met at the Deauville Film Festival in France, he walked in carrying charm on the surface and doubt underneath it all. He tried to impress her, talking big, hiding nerves behind bold confidence. "I will be the father of your children," he told her, a line meant to sound playful, smooth, unforgettable, but it didn't land like he planned. Catherine shut it down politely but firmly, leaving Michael with a sting of embarrassment he hadn't felt in years, and it cut deeper than he expected. That moment became the first tiny crack in the perfect story he imagined, a sharp reminder that Catherine wasn't someone he could sway with fame or status alone. Michael Douglas wasn't known for backing off, especially when something touched him that deeply. When Catherine left to film Entrapment in Scotland, he went all in, sending roses to her hotel, refusing to fade quietly into the background. She kept the card from that bouquet for over 20 years. A quiet symbol of the moment she started to see him differently, not as a Hollywood cliché, but as a man fighting for a second chance at life and love. By December 1999, they were engaged. 8 months later, in August 2000, their son Dylan was born, and that November, they stood together at the Plaza Hotel in New York, surrounded by Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, and Anthony Hopkins. It looked like a fairy tale on full display. Catherine in a David Emanuel gown, their baby carried down the aisle, Hollywood legends filling the room. The world saw destiny, glamour, perfection, but Michael felt something else creeping in. Even as the cameras flashed, he sensed shadows gathering quietly at the edges of the dream. Catherine's career didn't just rise, it exploded. In 2003, she took home an Oscar while pregnant with their daughter, Karis, and the world watched her soar higher by the minute. She was unstoppable, magnetic, locked in her prime. Michael felt proud, deeply proud, but beneath that pride sat a quiet fear he rarely admitted out loud. He tried to keep up, tried to stay sharp, but age was already tapping him on the shoulder and he refused to listen. Those early years looked golden from the outside. Love, success, red carpets, milestones stacked one after another. But underneath, something uneven was forming. Michael would later admit that even during the happiest moments, he felt a shadow looming ahead. He worried about a future where he might become too old, too worn down, too fragile for the woman he adored. That fear never fully left him. Then everything changed. By 2010, the cracks in Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones's marriage were impossible to ignore. For years, Michael pushed himself to match her energy, her youth, her rising power, her pull on the world. Catherine was 41 and at the absolute top of her game. Michael was 66, carrying decades of surgeries, stress, past addictions, and the undeniable weight of time pressing down on him. He tried to look unbreakable, played the strong role like he always had, but the gap between them widened year after year, and then came the moment that shattered everything. A quiet room, a doctor's voice, stage 4 throat cancer. One sentence that flipped their lives upside down overnight. The diagnosis hit like a wrecking ball. Michael went from controlling every part of his world to wondering if he'd even see the next month. And the first fear that grabbed him wasn't death. It was the thought of leaving his kids without a father and Catherine forced to carry their lives alone. Fear doesn't soften illness, though, and reality hit hard. The tumor sat at the base of his tongue, turning eating into agony, speaking into a struggle, and breathing into work. Chemotherapy and radiation were brutal, relentless, draining him piece by piece. For Catherine, the shift was terrifying. That 25-year age gap tabloids once joked about suddenly felt painfully real. She watched the man she married fade into someone fragile, exhausted, sometimes barely himself from the pain. She slept in chairs beside him, held his hand through endless nausea, and kept her composure even as she cracked inside. There was no room for her to fall apart, not while he fought for his life, not with the world watching every move. Hollywood painted her as the perfect, devoted wife, always by his side. But no one saw the nights she cried alone in the bathroom so Michael wouldn't hear. No one saw the guilt chewing at her, the fear that she wasn't strong enough, the helplessness stealing her peace bit by bit. Michael needed her, and she gave everything she had, but the emotional cost kept stacking up, and it wasn't sustainable. When Michael entered remission in early 2011, the world cheered loudly. He announced he was cancer-free on national television. But Catherine finally collapsed under the weight of months of tension, fear, and silence catching up with her. In the spring of 2011, she entered treatment for bipolar II disorder, revealing a truth she'd tried to hide even from herself. She was exhausted, drained, emotionally shattered. And as Michael slowly healed physically, he faced a painful realization. His illness hadn't just changed him. It had taken pieces of Catherine that she might never fully get back. While the public celebrated a miracle comeback, their marriage was quietly bending under the weight of trauma, sacrifice, and a fear neither of them knew how to say out loud. Recovery didn't mean relief. It meant realizing they might never be the same people again. And then came the separation no one saw coming. By 2012, the image of stability had fully cracked, even as fans still clung to the fairy tale they wanted to believe. Catherine Zeta-Jones entered treatment centers to manage bipolar II disorder, a reality she had kept locked away for years. She was drained to the core after months of being Michael's emotional backbone during his cancer fight, drained from holding together a household that revolved around survival instead of happiness, schedules instead of joy, strength instead of honesty. At the same time, Michael was trying to rebuild something fragile inside himself. Not just confidence as an actor or public figure, but confidence as a husband who feared he had already put his wife through more pain than she ever deserved. They were both recovering, but not together. They were healing like two people standing on opposite sides of a broken bridge, each holding wounds the other no longer had the strength to carry. The age gap, once brushed off as tabloid noise, became impossible to ignore inside their own walls. Catherine was in her early 40s, still driven, still hungry for movement and growth. After years of stepping back, she wanted momentum again. Michael, now in his late 60s, felt himself slowing down in ways he couldn't disguise anymore, and that truth hit hard. His body wasn't the same. His energy came and went, and quietly, constantly, he feared that Catherine no longer saw him as an equal partner, but as a responsibility she never asked for. By 2013, the emotional space between them turned cold and distant, a silence neither knew how to cross. And in August of that year, after nearly 13 years of marriage, they separated. No shouting, no public blow-ups, just two exhausted people finally admitting what had been hanging in the air for too long. Catherine left with the children, needing space, needing air, needing to reclaim pieces of herself that had faded during years of caregiving and emotional strain. Michael stayed behind in New York, alone for the first time in decades, surrounded by echoes of a life that had once felt full. Shortly after the separation became public, Michael returned to the Deauville Film Festival, the same place where everything had started back in 1998. Those who saw him said he looked thinner, older, like revisiting that memory only highlighted how far he'd fallen from the man he once was. In interviews, he avoided blame, saying, "We're working things out, choosing diplomacy over truth." But the people closest to him knew he was grieving deeply. It was the kind of grief without closure, the mourning of lost hope rather than lost love. Catherine played her part too. She walked red carpets, smiled for cameras, and gave interviews that suggested calm and control, but behind closed doors she was drowning in guilt, exhaustion, and resentment. She had put her career on pause for years, passed on roles, delayed dreams, and shifted her entire life because Michael needed her, and now she was left wondering who she had become in the process. Now separated, Catherine struggled to balance the love she still felt with the emotional damage she could no longer ignore. By early 2014, they appeared together again at public events, standing side by side, careful, polite, almost fragile. Fans celebrated what looked like a reunion, but insiders weren't buying the comeback story. What pulled them back together wasn't healing, it was their children, shared history, and a deep desire not to completely shatter the family they built. They moved back into the same home, but Michael later admitted the truth behind closed doors. They returned as different people, reshaped and scarred by illness, pressure, and years of emotional sacrifice. The marriage survived the separation, but it survived quietly, limping forward, held together by effort instead of ease. Silence filled the spaces where honesty once lived, and time made sure age could no longer be hidden. As the years passed, Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones tried to rebuild a life that had already shown deep cracks. They marked anniversaries, walked red carpets, and posted affectionate messages online, the kind of public gestures Hollywood knows by heart. But the truth Michael finally admitted at 80 was far heavier than any smiling photo ever showed. Their reconciliation didn't erase the damage, it simply covered it up. Beneath the surface sat a marriage that functioned but no longer thrived. Michael aged fast after his cancer battle. By 2020, even fans noticed he was slower, quieter, more fragile. Catherine, still vibrant at 51, found herself slipping back into the caretaker role once again, this time without the urgency of crisis to justify the sacrifice. She wanted more. She wanted to travel, work, chase new projects, play golf, and enjoy the full, active life she had always imagined for her 50s. Michael couldn't keep pace. He stayed home, weighed down by worry, world events, and the creeping fear of becoming irrelevant. The gap between their lives grew wider, even when they slept under the same roof. According to people close to them, Catherine's frustration didn't explode, it simmered. She had already pressed pause on her career once, and now she felt trapped between loyalty and resentment. Quiet whispers started circulating. Talk of private separations, discreet property divisions, and a marriage maintained more from habit than passion. They sold homes in Bermuda and tried to offload properties in New York and Mallorca. Each sale was read by those around them as another sign that the life they built was slowly dissolving. Michael finally admitted in private that the age gap, once brushed off as a romantic detail, had become the central conflict of their marriage. He began seeing himself through Catherine's eyes, slower, weaker, unpredictable in health. And Catherine, despite loving him deeply, could no longer ignore her own fading happiness. "I became her responsibility," Michael confessed to a friend, "not her partner." The realization hit hard. The woman he loved was losing herself while caring for him, and he had no way to fix it. At 80 years old, Michael Douglas stopped pretending. For decades, he protected the story the world wanted: glamour, luxury, red carpets, perfect photos. But aging has a brutal way of stripping illusions bare. Michael finally faced the truth he had carried alone for years. He spoke without anger, only exhaustion. Loving Catherine Zeta-Jones had been the greatest gift of his life and the hardest battle he ever fought. He adored her, but feared he had slowly become the source of her unhappiness. Friends confirmed what he rarely said out loud. He felt guilty. Guilty about the 25-year age difference that shaped every chapter of their story. Guilty that his illness stole pieces of her youth. Guilty that her dreams were delayed, reshaped, or abandoned to accommodate his declining strength. Guilty that Catherine, known for her fire, ambition, and talent, had been forced into the role of caretaker far too often. Even in 2023 and 2024, as they celebrated anniversaries and shared loving posts, the private reality was more fragile than ever. Catherine, now 55, stood at a crossroads, a career she wanted back, a world she still longed to explore, and a husband she loved but could not carry forever. Michael, fully aware of his limits, began quietly preparing himself for the day she might finally let go. Now separated, Catherine struggled to make peace with the love she still felt and the emotional damage she could no longer deny. By early 2014, they appeared together again at public events, standing close but looking cautious, polite, almost fragile. Fans cheered what looked like a reunion, but insiders weren't fooled. What brought them back wasn't healing. It was the kids, shared memories, and a deep need to avoid tearing the family apart completely. They moved back into the same house, but Michael later admitted the truth behind closed doors. They didn't return as the same couple. They came back as two people shaped and scarred by years of illness, pressure, and emotional sacrifice. The marriage survived the separation, but it survived quietly, limping forward, held together by effort instead of ease. Silence filled the space where honesty once lived, and time made sure age couldn't be hidden anymore. As the years went on, Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones tried to rebuild a life that already showed deep cracks. They celebrated anniversaries, walked red carpets, and posted loving tributes online, the kind of public signals Hollywood understands well. But the truth Michael only dared to admit when he turned 80 was far heavier than any smiling photo suggested. Their reconciliation didn't heal the damage, it only covered it up. Beneath the surface was a marriage that functioned but no longer thrived. Michael aged fast after his cancer battle. By 2020, even fans noticed he was slower, quieter, more fragile. Catherine, still vibrant at 51, found herself stepping back into the caretaker role again, but this time without the adrenaline of crisis to justify the sacrifice. She wanted more from life. She wanted to travel, to work, to chase new projects, to play golf, and enjoy the energy she always imagined for her 50s. Michael couldn't keep up. He stayed home, weighed down by worry, by the chaos of the world, and by a quiet fear of becoming irrelevant. The distance between their lives grew, even when they shared the same roof. According to people close to them, Catherine's frustration didn't explode. It built slowly. She had already paused her career once, and now she felt stuck between loyalty and resentment. The whispers grew louder. Talk of quiet separations, discreet property divisions, and a marriage held together more by habit than love. They sold homes in Bermuda and tried to offload estates in New York and Majorca. Each sale felt like another brick removed from the life they once built together. Michael finally admitted in private that the age gap, once brushed off as a romantic detail, had turned into the central tension of their marriage. He started seeing himself through Catherine's eyes, slower, weaker, unpredictable in health. And Catherine, despite loving him deeply, could no longer ignore her own fading happiness. "I became her responsibility," Michael confessed to a friend, "not her partner." The realization hit hard. The woman he loved was losing herself while caring for him, and he had no way to stop it. At 80 years old, Michael Douglas stopped pretending. For decades, he protected the story the world wanted: glamour, luxury, red carpets, perfect photos. But aging strips illusions down to the bone. Michael finally faced the truth he had carried alone for years. He spoke without anger, only exhaustion. Loving Catherine Zeta-Jones had been the greatest gift of his life and the hardest battle he ever fought. He adored her, but feared he had slowly become the reason for her unhappiness. Friends confirmed what he rarely said out loud. He felt guilt on every level. Guilty about the 25-year age gap that shaped their entire story. Guilty that his illness stole pieces of her youth. Guilty that her dreams were delayed, reshaped, or put on hold to fit his declining strength. Guilty that a woman known for her fire, talent, and ambition had been pushed into the role of caretaker far too often. Even in 2023 and 2024, as they celebrated anniversaries and shared loving messages, the private reality stayed fragile. Catherine, now 55, stood at a crossroads. A career she wanted back, a world she still wanted to explore, and a husband she loved but could not carry forever. Michael, fully aware of his limits, quietly prepared himself for the day she might finally let go. If this story made you think, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you believe really happened behind the scenes, and I'll see you on the next one. Not out of betrayal, but out of survival, Michael confessed something that still haunts him. The real horror isn't losing love. It's realizing the person you love is slowly fading right beside you and knowing deep down that you're the reason. Insiders claim they're now living in a silent separation, dividing assets quietly, carefully, with no headlines and no chaos. No accusations, no explosive fights, just two people who fought too hard, endured too much, and finally reached the moment where love alone couldn't hold everything together anymore. After a lifetime under bright lights, Michael Douglas accepted the truth he avoided for years. Even the strongest love can fracture when age, illness, sacrifice, and silence crash into each other. So what do you think? Can this marriage still survive, or have they already crossed the point of no return? If you want more untold Hollywood stories, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you on the next one.